Welcome to Police Academy Prep. This is Deputy Z. Today we will be going through the Law Enforcement Basic Recruit Book of the Police Academy, going into Chapter 6, Serving Your Community. This will be the in-depth recording version where I read from the entire chapter and provide insight to potential test question and real-life situations. Be sure to watch a short edition version if you're looking for a more quicker, less in-depth recap consisting of only highlighted topics. Let's go ahead and jump into the chapter. So this chapter is going to have 3 units here: interacting with your community, responding to a person in crisis, and identifying and responding to high-risk groups. So we'll jump right into responding to your community. A community's relationship with law enforcement can greatly affect how officers do their jobs. Responding to situations that have the potential to become volatile can cause reactions of inflexibility, aggression, fear, and anger. This can negatively affect the communication between you and your community and make conflict more likely. During your duties as a law enforcement officer, you will encounter vulnerable adults, such as the elderly, people with disabilities, and people with mental health disorders. A vulnerable adult, bolded test question here, is a person 18 or older whose ability to perform the activities of daily living or to provide for their own care or protection is impaired. Often, this is due to a mental, emotional, sensory, long-term physical, or developmental disability or dysfunction, brain damage, or the infirmities of aging. Be sensitive and aware of people's differences and demonstrate respect for their limitations. Never dismiss or disregard a person because of their differences. Techniques to use when responding to vulnerable adults. Possible test questions here. Minimize distractions and disperse any crowds. Respect personal space and avoid physical contact. Remember to relax and breathe and to use calming body language. Allow the person's self-stimulating behaviors to continue if the situation allows, unless there is immediate danger. Once the person is calmed, assist them as needed. The way you interact with your community can help keep encounters courteous and polite. When interacting with the public, maintain eye contact and speak directly to a person, even if an interpreter is present. Other techniques can include speaking clearly and in a respectful tone of voice, using short, simple phrases and avoiding slang expressions, modeling the behavior you want to see, maintaining a calm and reassuring tone, and using encouragement throughout your encounter. Any encounter with the public has the opportunity to become tense. To maintain peace and prevent a situation from escalating, employ these techniques. Practice calming, diffuse the intensity of the situation. Assess the situation, be aware of behavior statements and possible role of substances. Consider the environment, be aware of the environment's effect and current circumstances. Now we move on to serving the elderly. Okay, according to Chapter 825 of the Florida Statutes, an elderly person is, test question here, a person 60 years of age or older who is suffering from the infirmities of aging as manifested by advanced age or organic brain damage, or other physical, mental, or emotional dysfunction, to the extent that the ability of the person to provide adequately for their person's own care or protection is impaired. So again, 60 years of age or older. Common characteristics of an elderly person may include limited mobility, vision, or hearing, lack of strength, bone deterioration, or memory loss. They may live alone with family members in nursing homes or be homeless. Okay. 2 common causes of memory loss in an elderly person include 1, dementia, and 2, Alzheimer's disease. Know these for the test. Dementia is an umbrella term used to describe an organic, progressive mental disorder characterized by loss of memory, an impairment of judgment and abstract thinking, and changes in personality. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive brain disorder that gradually destroys a person's memory and ability to learn, reason, make judgments, communicate, and carry out daily activities. As Alzheimer's progresses, a person may also experience changes in personality and behavior such as anxiety, suspicion, or agitation, as well as delusions or hallucinations. So again, dementia is an organic, progressive mental disorder, where Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disorder. So again, Alzheimer's is brain, where dementia is mental disorder, organic mental disorder. Okay, let's see here. Know the guidelines for talking with an elderly person. Make sure you understand the problem from their perspective. Explain what you can do to help them. Speak directly to them. Use a conversational tone and speak loudly if necessary. Use caution when allowing caregivers to speak on behalf of them. Include them in all discussions concerning their welfare. Treat them with dignity, respect, and patience. Okay. Resources for people who are elderly. Know about the Department of Elder Affairs. They provide direct services to the elderly through its division of statewide community-based services. Also know the Florida Elder Helpline. The helpline provides information to help older residents obtain social local services. The 211 helpline is another resource available to the elderly. So no 211 helpline, Florida Elder Helpline, and the Department of Elder Affairs. All right, juveniles. Young people generally reflect the values instilled in them by their families, schools, communities, and cultures. Some children are exposed to domestic violence, either as victims or witnesses. They may hear one parent or caregiver threaten the other, observe a parent losing control, see one parent assault the other, or live with the aftermath of a violent assault. These children are susceptible to PTSD in addition to experiencing physical health issues and demonstrating behavior problems in adolescence, such as juvenile delinquency and alcohol or substance misuse. Florida law defines a person younger than 18 years of age as a juvenile. While the age of legal maturity is 18, the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. So that's also a possible test question. So remember, younger than 18 is a juvenile. Legal maturity is 18, but the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. Some juveniles may want to push the boundaries of the rules, both at home and in public, and they may show a high degree of irresponsibility, a lack of respect for authority, and unpredictable behavioral patterns such as fighting, bullying, using weapons, and participating in gang-related violence. Without successful interventions, they may go on to become juvenile offenders. According to the U.S. Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, juveniles who start offending when they are younger than 13 are more likely to become serious and violent offenders. Know that for the test as well. Younger than 13, more likely to become serious and violent offenders. Juvenile offenders may display manipulative and defiant behaviors when interacting with others, including law enforcement. Physical assault is the primary crime committed against juveniles. Bullying via social media is a growing issue, though. Let's see. So, physical assault is the primary crime committed against juveniles. A high degree of self-control, patience, flexibility, and understanding is required to work effectively with juveniles. Adapt to whatever situation arises. Let's see. When dealing with juvenile offenders, you can take a variety of actions depending on the seriousness of the problem and the evidence, if any, of misconduct. Your actions may involve issuing commands, informing the parents or guardians, conducting an investigation, arresting the juvenile, or releasing the juvenile. A juvenile younger than 7 years of age may not be arrested or charged unless the violation is a forcible felony or a third-degree felony of burglary or trespassing with burglary tools. So again, a juvenile younger than 7 years of age may not be arrested or charged unless it is a forcible felony or third-degree felony of burglary. Runaway children. Children who run away are at a considerable risk of falling prey to horrible crimes. Always presume that the runaway child is in danger. You have no arrest authority for a child who is a runaway or an absentee from school. However, if you believe a child is a runaway, take the child into protective custody and contact the parent or legal guardian of the child. All right. Let's see. If you reasonably believe that a child is an absentee, you can take the child in protective custody and deliver them back to the school system. If the parent or guardian is not available for a runaway child, contact the Department of Children and Families. Protective custody is not a criminal arrest, so know about protective custody. Serving veterans. Veterans transitioning from active duty to civilian life poses unique experiences from military culture and combat. Let's see here. Visible signs of current or prior military experience may include tattoos with military subject matter, providing a military ID along with a driver's license, Florida driver's license with a veteran or V on it, license plate bumper stickers with military subject matter, body language, for example, command presence, military style haircut, blended clothing such as a t-shirt with camouflage pants and a cap. If you suspect that a veteran committed a crime, be aware that they might have a high level of weapons or defensive tactics training due to their prior or current military service, so maintain proper situational awareness. Because of their exposure to traumatic experiences, some veterans may have pronounced stressors caused by musculoskeletal injuries. Interesting. Neurological injuries or psychological disorders. These disabilities may be significant but not necessarily immediately noticeable. Some veterans may have PTSD or a traumatic brain injury. A TBI or traumatic brain injury, test question here, is a structural and often occurs as the result of sudden injury that causes damage to the brain. It's structural and often occurs as a result of sudden injury that causes damage to the brain, frequently resulting from combat. Know that for the test. Some common signs and symptoms of TBI are loss of balance, slurred speech, disorientation, and irritability. Law enforcement officers who are combat veterans suggest doing the following when responding to an incident involving a veteran. 1. Gain their trust, and 2. Do not corner the person. Okay, test question. Cornering veterans, especially those who might have a TBI or PTSD, is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. Combat veterans faced with this situation will usually choose to battle because that is their training. Alright, coping behaviors exhibited by veterans. Veterans with PTSD may try to gain control over their environment by applying various coping behaviors that mask deeper issues. Common negative coping behavior veterans use include misusing substances, avoiding situations, people, or things, hypervigilance, which is being constantly on guard for danger, feeling anger and resorting to violence, engaging in dangerous behavior, or working too much. As an officer, recognizing negative coping behavior early in your interactions with veterans may help you avoid potentially dangerous situations and find better ways to serve them. Alright, now we're going to move on to serving the homeless. Alright, homelessness. According to the Florida statutes, homeless, test question, is defined as a person who does not have a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. One type of homelessness is unsheltered. You know what unsheltered means? It refers to people who live in places not meant for human habitation, either on the streets, in cars, in wooded areas, or in abandoned buildings. Others are quote-unquote sheltered, know what that means, but are still homeless because they are staying in homeless shelters or transitional housing until they find stable permanent housing on their own. So again, for homeless people, you have unsheltered and sheltered. The experience of homelessness is traumatic and daily survival is a challenge. Many people who are homeless have committed what are considered imprisonable offenses, such as thefts, burglaries, and other crimes of opportunity. In addition, without the security of a home, homeless people become vulnerable and easy targets for crime. They're also reluctant to report crimes as well, because they're trying to avoid contact with law enforcement. Alright. Being homeless is not a crime, and it is rarely a choice. So know that term. It is not a crime, and it is rarely a choice. As an officer, you can provide information about services instead of making an arrest when interacting with people who are homeless. Okay. Transporting a person who's homeless to an alternate location, such as a faith-based organization with related outreach or shelter services, may eliminate the original concern that required the attention of law enforcement. Become familiar with local resources, including shelters and social programs provided through a Crisis Intervention Team, CIT, Crisis Intervention Team. Know that for the test. Okay, Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, is a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in all areas of public life, such as jobs, schools, and transportation. As a law enforcement officer, you must understand the requirements of the ADA to effectively interact with people who have a disability. According to the ADA, a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity, has a record of impairment, or is regarded as having an impairment. Know that for the test. A substantial limitation is know what a substantial limitation is as well. It is a restriction of the way, condition, or amount of time in which a person can perform major life activities compared to non-impaired people. Major life activities include caring for yourself, performing mutual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, and working. Other major life activities include sitting, standing, and lifting, and mental and emotional processes such as thinking, concentrating, and interacting with others. Examples of impairments include back or spinal injuries, psychiatric or mental disabilities, neurological impairments, extremity impairments, heart impairments, drug addiction, diabetes, hearing impairments, vision impairments, and blood disorders. The most common disabilities that you will encounter are psychiatric or mental disabilities, neurological impairments, vision, hearing, and speech impairments, and extremity impairments. The ADA prohibits discrimination against a person with a disability in all services, programs, and activities provided to the public by state and local governments. Okay, the ADA does not prevent you from enforcing laws, but it does affect how you interact with people who have disabilities. Alright, Chapter 825 of Florida Statutes defines a disabled adult, know this for the test, as a person 18 years of older who suffers from a condition of physical or mental incapacitation due to a developmental disability, organic brain damage, or mental illness, or has one or more physical or mental limitations that restrict the person's ability to perform the normal activities of daily living. People with disabilities have the same rights as everyone else, and you must protect these rights. All right. When it comes to Miranda, they might not be able to understand it in the way you explain it. So explain it slowly, let them read it, etc. Okay. Some people with disabilities use a service animal, such as a dog, trained to assist them with daily activities. Under the ADA, a service animal is defined as a dog that has been individually trained to do work or perform tasks for a person with a disability. Know that for the test. Tasks performed by the dog must be directly related to the person's disability. Examples of such tasks include guiding a person who is blind, alerting a person who is deaf, alerting and protecting a person who is having a seizure, or binding a person with a mental illness to take prescribed medications, or calming a person with PTSD during an anxiety attack. A service animal for a person with a vision, hearing, and mobility impairment may or may not wear an identifying harness or vest. The person may have documentation showing that the animal is a service animal. However, no certification is required under the law. If it is apparent that the animal is a service animal, you may not question the animal's service. Under the ADA, in situations where it is not obvious that the animal is a service animal, you may only ask two specific questions. 1, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And 2, what work or tasks has the dog been trained to perform? A person with a service animal is entitled to freely access public areas. If a person you arrest uses a service animal, you must arrange care for the animal. It is preferred that you place it with a family member or friend rather than taking it to animal control. All right, physical impairments. So we'll start with mobility impairment. A physical or mobility impairment, this is a bolded test question here, is a functional limitation that affects one or more of a person's limbs. People with mobility impairments may have limited use of one or more of their extremities for walking, grasping, or lifting objects. There are special considerations to keep in mind when communicating with a person who has a mobility impairment, such as maintaining good eye contact and asking if the person would like assistance before providing it. Vision impairment is a loss or partial loss of sight that cannot be corrected by usual means, such as glasses. The types of vision impairment that you will encounter most often are blindness and partial sight. Know these for the test. Blindness is a functional loss of sight. This definition applies both to people who cannot see at all, they cannot distinguish light from dark, and people who have some vision in one or both eyes. Where partial sight is a vision impairment in which, after correction, objects still look dim or out of focus. So remember, blindness is they're either fully blind or partially blind, where partial sight means they got it corrected, but it's still dim or out of focus. People with partial sight may not see color well or at all and may lack peripheral vision, but they can still see and even read with magnifiers or other aids. All right, hearing impairment is any degree of hearing loss. The two classifications of hearing loss are hard of hearing and deafness. A person who is hard of hearing may have hearing loss, but not to the extent that they may rely primarily on visual communication, such as written notes or sign language. Okay, so basically if they're hard of hearing, they just have problems hearing, doesn't mean they need to use sign language, right? Hearing aids may not improve the person's ability to understand words, but may increase their ability to hear sound. Where deafness is severe hearing loss to the extent that the person must rely primarily on visual tools such as writing, sign language, and lip reading to communicate. Some people who are deaf or hard of hearing may have poor balance or slurred speech and may appear to be intoxicated. When interacting with a person who is deaf or hard of hearing, attempt to gain the person's attention first. A light touch on their arm draws their attention and avoids a startled response. For many people who are deaf or hard of hearing, sign language and other forms of nonverbal communication are their primary language. A certified sign language interpreter, test question here, is a person who can both receive and express information and interpret it effectively, accurately, and impartially. Okay, make sure you speak directly to the person and not to the interpreter. If the interpreter is not available, you may need to ask the person to use pen and paper, saving the document as evidence relating to an incident. You can also use other aids that they might have or other aids that you might have. Florida court cases involving defendants who are deaf or hard of hearing are sometimes dismissed because of events occurring before Miranda rights are explained. This emphasizes the importance of understanding the communication problems associated with hearing impairments. When advising a person who is deaf or hard of hearing of the Miranda rights, provide their rights in a manner understood by them, such as writing or by using a sign language interpreter. According to the ADA, a person who is deaf or hard of hearing has the right to choose what kind of communication help they need. All right, then we have speech impairment. Know this for the test as well. Speech impairment is a physiological condition that causes a person to have difficulty in producing sound or understandable language. Speech impairment can result from hearing loss, a neurological disorder, a brain injury, or physical impairment such as a cleft lip or palate. Speech impairments may have forms including voice and sound disorders, stuttering, slurring, lisping, and mumbling. All right, now we're moving to serving people with developmental disabilities. Test question here. The Florida statutes define a developmental disability as a disorder or syndrome that is attributable to cerebral palsy, autism, spina bifida, Down syndrome, Phelan-McDermott syndrome, Prader-Willi syndrome, or an intellectual disability. It is a disability that manifests before the age of 18, constitutes a substantial handicap, and continues indefinitely. So you got to know that entire, for the test, that entire definition. A developmental disability may affect a person's intellectual functioning and can make it harder for them to learn. The symptoms vary for each person depending on their condition. All right, let's see. People with developmental disabilities may have substantial functional limitations in major life activities and the ability to be economically self-sufficient. All right, here we go. Be aware of community resources that can assist, including mental health facilities, Department of Children and Families, or crisis centers. Now we move on to intellectual disabilities. Intellectual disabilities are types of developmental disabilities that are lifelong conditions characterized by slow intellectual development. A number of conditions, ranging from genetic conditions to illness and injury, can cause an intellectual disability. A psychological evaluation is required to diagnose an intellectual disability early in childhood. These disabilities cannot be cured, but using the appropriate modifications and accommodations can enhance a person's capabilities and independence. The majority of people with an intellectual disability function at a mild level disability, which may not be easily identifiable. People with a moderate intellectual disability, well, actually, let's start over here. So we have 4 different types of disabilities here. We have, a mild level disability, moderate level, a severe level, and a profound level. So I'm going to give you the definition of each of them. You have to know these for the test. They will ask you these in multiple different ways, so be prepared for that. Okay, so the mild level disability is not easily identifiable. People functioning at this level can learn academic and provocational skills with special training and can work within their community. People with a mild intellectual disability might not understand long-term consequences or be able to make appropriate choices, but they do sometimes realize when they have done something wrong. People with a moderate intellectual disability may recognize their own needs and wants, but not immediately identify the needs and wants of others. People with a moderate intellectual disability can achieve a primary academic education and may be able to perform semi-skilled work under direct supervision. They can be independent in familiar surroundings, but may easily be frustrated with unfamiliar surroundings and circumstances. They may have trouble describing events in chronological order and may not understand cause and effect. While they may understand that they have done something wrong, they may not grasp the significance of their actions. People with severe intellectual disability have slow motor development and communication skills and are frequently under close and constant supervision, such as in a group home setting. They are usually encouraged to contribute to their own self-maintenance, however, they may not be fully capable of living independently. People with a profound intellectual disability require constant care and supervision and may or may not have well-developed basic speech. Generally, you will not come into direct contact with them, but will deal directly with the caregiver. So the best way to remember these, you really should get a grasp on the full definition because they might ask different types inside each paragraph of one of those. But how I learned this is your mild level, they can learn academic and provocational skills with special training and they can work in their community. Where with moderate, I remember that they can achieve a primary academic education and they can perform semi-skilled work under direct supervision. With the severe, They are frequently under close and constant supervision, such as in a group home setting, is what I remember. And then for profound, that one's going to be easiest to remember. Just constant care, constant supervision, and they may or may not be able to speak. And usually you will speak directly with a caregiver. So it really comes to those things, is what I noticed on the test, is they ask more about that, not the other nuances in between them. All right, here we go. Let's see. All right, so know what the ARC is. It is ARC is a nationwide organization that provides resources for people and intellectual and developmental disabilities or another local intake facility. Serving people with autism. So ASD, autism spectrum disorder, test question, is a type of developmental disorder that is diagnosed in early childhood and continues throughout adulthood. It is characterized by language and social developmental delay and repetitive behaviors. Every person in the autism spectrum is unique and might have a variety of symptoms. Autism can be difficult to recognize as it does not always have visual indicators. Autistic people may engage in coping skills known as self-stimulating behaviors, test question, also called stimming, which is engaging in these behaviors. Engaging in these behaviors may allow an overstimulated person to calm down in a stressful environment, or may provide an understimulated person with sensory stimulation. Examples, the examples as well, include body rocking, hand flapping, skin picking, hair twirling, or finger flicking. Then you have your self-injury behavior, such as hand biting, self-rubbing, and head banging or scratching. Autistic people are frequently the victims of crimes such as abuse, neglect, sexual battery, and robbery, and they are sometimes conspirators in crimes due to their trusting natures and their inability to understand social norms. All right. Let's see here. Ensuring safety while in custody. Okay, there are added safety concerns to be aware when taking a person with ASD into custody. These concerns include self-injurious behaviors and medical issues such as seizure disorders. The following techniques can help ensure safety while in custody. All right, let's see here. So, evaluate the person for injuries, wait for signs of trouble breathing when restrained, and alert the detention facility that you have a person with ASD in your custody. Serving people with mental illnesses. As defined by the Florida statutes, test question here, mental illness is an impairment of the mental or emotional processes that exercise the conscious control of one's actions. Mental illness may hinder a person's ability to perceive or understand reality. A person with a mental illness may have a thought disorder, mood disorder, anxiety disorder, or personality disorder, and it is common for a person to have any combination of these disorders. Mental illness is not directly related to intelligence and occurs in people of all intellectual disabilities. It does not necessarily interfere with intellectual abilities, but it may require psychiatric evaluation and treatment. Developmental disabilities are different from mental illness. Developmental disabilities deal with below average intellectual functioning and the ability to learn and process information, whereas mental illness refers to disturbances in how people process their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Developmental disabilities occur before a person reaches adulthood, while mental illness can occur at any time in a person's life. Make sure you know how they're differentiating between developmental disabilities and mental illness, because that'll be on the test as well. They ask you which is which, and you need to make sure you know the difference. Okay, some medical conditions and the effects of certain substances that people take can mimic mental illness symptoms. Okay, then we have thought disorders. A thought disorder is a disturbance in a person's ability to create a logical sequence of ideas, which can appear as disordered speech or writing. You might also notice that the person reports hearing or seeing things that are not present or are not real. If so, this person is having a hallucination. Test question. Hallucination is a sensory experience in which a person can hear, see, smell, taste, or feel something that is not there. If the person is hearing voices, you may want to ask them, what are the voices saying, rather than what do you hear? A delusion, test question, is a false belief that is firmly held despite obvious proof or evidence to the contrary. The delusion is this person's reality. Symptoms of hallucinations and delusions are often present in people with thought disorders such as schizophrenia. Okay, then we move on to mood disorders. Mood disorders are emotional disturbances with long periods of excessive sadness, excessive joyousness, or both. The excessive sadness is different from the brief situational depressive episodes that most people commonly experience with the loss of a loved one, job, or finances. A mood disorder is diagnosed with sadness, depression, or joyous mania, is overly intense and persistent, and significantly impairs the person's capacity to function. So that's the difference between a normal person having depression and someone with a mood disorder, is that it significantly impairs the person's capacity to function. The person with a mood disorder may have multiple major depressive episodes and may be profoundly sad and suicidal, cry uncontrollably, or be unable to concentrate, eat, or sleep. During a manic episode, the person may be easily distracted or may have an exaggerated sense of self, powers, and abilities. Examples of mood disorders include major depressive disorder, MDD, and bipolar disorder. You're going to need to know those for the test. Okay, so remember that bipolar disorder and major depressive disorder are mood disorders. Okay, then we move on to anxiety disorders. An anxiety disorder is different from the occasional anxiety we all experience, as the episodes of anxiety are more frequent, intense, and last longer. Anxiety becomes a disorder when it affects a person's daily ability to function. The disorder does not go away and can become worse over time. A person with an anxiety disorder may experience a panic attack with symptoms of a racing heartbeat, sweating tension, and a feeling that something terrible is about to happen. Anxiety disorders such as, know these types of anxiety disorders, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, may cause a person to have uncontrollable recurring thoughts, obsessions, and behaviors, compulsions that they feel the urge to repeat over and over. So for each of these disorders, know the definition of them and know the types of them. So again, for anxiety disorder, you have OCD. For mood disorders, you have bipolar and major depressive disorder. Then you have personality disorder. A personality disorder is a deeply ingrained, non-psychotic, and flexible pattern of relating, perceiving, and behaving. Personality disorders involve a continuing pattern of inner experience and behaviors that differs noticeably from the accepted behavior of a person's culture. It is serious enough to cause distress to the people around the affected person. Okay, the person may display anxious, fearful, dramatic, emotional, or unpredictable behavior and impaired functioning. Okay, examples of personality disorders include antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, and narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. Responding to people with mental illnesses. Because some people with a mental illness can be unpredictable, keep everyone's safety in mind. Alright, let's see here. Unless a crime of violence has been committed or a dangerous weapon is involved, respond to the incident with a person who is known to or believed to have a mental illness in the same basic way you would anyone else. While you are not in a position to solve the problems of a person with a mental illness, the person you encounter may come into contact with law enforcement again in the future, and your actions may have a long-term impact on the person's perceptions toward law enforcement officers. Alright, crisis situations. Social service agencies are not qualified to enter extreme crisis situations, so law enforcement officers must respond to these incidents and are often the first on the scene. Crisis intervention is one of your most important duties as a law enforcement officer. Test question. Crisis intervention. During a crisis, you have the duty to recognize, respond, and intervene safely, professionally, and effectively. A person in crisis may not have any help other than what you can provide. Each intervention is important to the person in crisis, their family, and the community. Let's see. Crisis intervention is a potentially hazardous part of your duties as a law enforcement officer. If unmanaged, a conflict can quickly evolve into a crisis. So a crisis, test question, is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger, especially when the affected person feels unprepared and pressured to take action or make a decision. However, a crisis is also defined by the person's perception of and response to the event. If a person sees the event as significant and threatening, has used all of their coping strategies without success, and is unaware of or unable to pursue other alternatives, then a state of crisis exists. A crisis can add stress to a person's life or to an entire community. There are significant crises that people may experience at some point in time. Job loss, financial loss, a serious health issue, death of a loved one, separation from family and friends, natural disasters, house fires, and vehicle accidents. Do not minimize or judge a person's reaction to a situation. You may not perceive the situation as a crisis. However, the person experiencing the crisis may see it as a traumatic event. Okay, behavioral characteristics of a person in crisis: flushed face, heavy rapid breathing, unclenching a fist, pacing, pointing fingers, tightening lips, clenching the teeth, sweating, and an unreal calmness. The unreal calmness one is going to be a big one for the test question. If they ask you any sort of characteristics for a person in crisis, the unreal calmness is going to be big because it's just unexpected. So, for example, if a house is burning down, if they give you like a situational type question and they say the house is burning down and the person is responding with an unreal calmness, what is this person suffering from? And the answer would be is suffering from a crisis. When interacting with a person in crisis, observe their behavior before taking any legal action, such as an arrest, or before applying the Baker Act or Marchman Act. You may need to call for a crisis intervention team, a CIT. Alright, when dealing with someone in crisis, summarize your thoughts and feelings to help them feel validated. Use an empathetic, non-judgmental tone. Avoid minimizing. Avoid placing blame. And ask how you can help. Crisis intervention and referral. Let's see here. Okay, when dealing with a person in crisis, you must answer the following questions. Can the person care for themselves? Are they a threat to themselves or others? So those are the two questions really for a Baker Act that you should know. You should be familiar with the different types of crisis intervention. Examples include relocating the person to a safe environment, taking the person into custody if they have committed a crime, initiating an involuntary treatment referral via the Baker Act or Marchman Act, making a referral for services, or arranging for or providing transportation as necessary. Alright, so now we're getting into the Baker Act. Alright. You may respond to a call for service involving a person demonstrating that they are in danger to themselves or others. The Florida Mental Health Act of 1971, also referred to as the Florida Baker Act, or simply the Baker Act, provides people who have a mental illness or who may harm or neglect themselves or others with an emergency service and temporary detention for psychiatric evaluation and voluntary or involuntary short-term inpatient treatment. A voluntary examination is a decision by a person to willingly seek a psychiatric evaluation for symptoms that may be due to mental illness. Know that for the test. If a person is willing to seek treatment, ask them to submit to a voluntary examination. The person must be competent to make the decision and be at least 18 years old. Alright, if they're under 18, then ask the person's guardian for consent. Avoid using the Baker Act to deal with difficult people. Instead, use it for people who have determined or that they are a danger to themselves or to others. The law requires that a person be extended the same rights whether under voluntary or involuntary status. Alright, now we move into criteria for the Baker Act. The Florida statutes state that a person may be taken into a receiving facility for involuntary examination under the Baker Act if there is reason to believe that the person has a mental illness, and because of their mental illness, 1. The person has refused voluntary examination after receiving a thorough explanation and disclosure of the purpose of the examination, or is unable to determine for themselves whether the examination is necessary. And 2, without care or treatment, the person is likely to either 1, cause serious bodily harm to themselves or others in the near future, or 2, suffer from neglect or refuse to care for themselves, and such neglect or refusal poses a real and present threat of substantial harm to their well-being. When a law enforcement agency receives notification that a person has communicated a specific threat to cause serious bodily injury or death to an identified person, appropriate action must be taken to prevent the risk of harm. This includes notifying the intended victim of the threat or initiating an RPO. Alright, initiating a mental health evaluation. The Baker Act provides several options for initiating a mental health evaluation and includes the following. The person volunteers to receive treatment. The court is petitioned for an ex parte order. The officer takes the person into custody for a mental health evaluation, or a physician, clinical psychologist, psychiatric nurse, mental health counselor, marriage and family therapist, or some other worker meets the criteria for examination under the Baker Act. Implementing the Baker Act. Determine if a person should be referred or taken into custody for a voluntary or involuntary psychiatric evaluation during a crisis depends on the specific situation. So how the person interacts with you and other people on the scene will help you decide. Situations that involve the Baker Act have the potential to be volatile, and backup is highly recommended. Okay, you must complete documentation, provide it to the receiving facility, and include it in your report. So then we have moving on to suicide risk. As an officer responding to a situation where a person is suicidal, you must remain aware of officer safety issues while also providing intervention. Suicide threat calls are life-threatening situations for everyone involved. So that's the test question. Suicide threat calls are life-threatening situations for everyone involved. People with suicidal intentions have a diminished perceived value of life and may be more inclined to harm others. A person with suicidal intentions may talk about committing suicide, attempt intentional self-injury, write suicide notes, or sketch death-related drawings. Indicators of suicide risk. There are many factors. Let's see. A person despairing over the loss of a loved one, a person depressed by life stressors, or feels their future is hopeless might consider suicide. If someone talks about committing suicide or attempts self-injury or comes up with a suicide plan, take them seriously. Not all people at risk for suicide show violence or anger. Some can seem eerily calm. Most initial attempts do not result in death and are often a cry for help. However, always take an attempt seriously and use appropriate caution. Intervening with a person at risk for suicide. Before arriving at the scene with a person at risk of suicide, you should request assistance and additional officers, EMS, or CIT. Coordinate responsibilities and tactics with other responding officers in EMS, and request dispatch information about weapons on the scene, the person's intended method of suicide, and the person's location and call history. Once on scene, test question, immediately determine if the person has access to weapons. Be aware that the person could initiate a sudden attack on you or others. If there is no immediate threat to yourself or others, attempt to talk to the person. Make sure to clear the scene of any weapons, possible weapons, or bystanders. Alright. Let's see. Avoid intentionally exposing yourself to unnecessary danger to disarm a suicidal person. If attempts to speak to the person do not de-escalate the situation, use appropriate tactics, equipment, and verbal commands. You can use less lethal weapons such as pepper spray as the situation dictates. These situations can be volatile, and you may have to resort to deadly force. Some people may attempt to end their lives by intentionally provoking officers to use deadly force. This is commonly referred to as suicide by cop. Know that for the test. All right. Available resources. You have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, also known as 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You also have some other local resources for that. Then we move into substance misuse. Alright, so first we're going to talk about substance use versus substance misuse. Substance use is the intake of a substance that can lead to substance misuse. So again, substance use is the intake of substances that can lead to substance misuse. It can be a legal therapeutic prescription or an illegal recreational use of a substance. Substance use can include having a casual drink with friends, taking a prescribed drug according to label and directions, or taking aspirin daily to prevent heart disease. Substance misuse, also referred to as substance abuse, is the inappropriate use of substance that negatively affects the mind and body, adversely impacting a person's social or occupational life and psychological or physical health. So, misusing prescribed medication, binge drinking, sniffing or inhaling glue, or using cocaine would be examples of substance abuse. Substance misuse can quickly lead to substance dependence or addiction. Substance dependence is the physical and psychological loss of control due to disruption of chemicals in the brain. So again, substance use is just using substances. Substance misuse is abusing them, and it negatively affects your mind and body. Where substance Substance dependence is the physical and psychological loss of control due to chemicals in the brain. So that's how you memorize those three. Substance misuse can also lead to an overdose. Test question here. Overdose is the accidental or intentional use of dangerously large amounts of a substance that can lead to death. Drug overdose is often underreported out of fear of arrest. Okay. Keep in mind that you cannot charge, prosecute, or penalize a person for possession of a controlled substance when someone acting in good faith seeks assistance for the person experiencing a drug-related overdose. Know that for the test. Illnesses that mimic substance misuse. Know these for the test. Your biggest one is going to be your diabetic shock, which may cause a person to stagger and appear drunk. Diabetic coma, which may cause a person's breath to smell sweet. like a fruity alcoholic drink. An epileptic episode may cause a person to appear as if they are in a drunken stupor. High blood pressure can sometimes cause people to become temporarily irrational. A head injury can cause people to be confused and aggressive. A stroke may cause a person to appear dizzy and confused. Parkinson's disease may cause a person to shake, slur their speech, or appear intoxicated. Cerebral palsy and Wernicke syndrome may cause a person to appear confused and have faulty muscular coordination. Degenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and dementia may cause a person to stagger, act inappropriately, be forgetful, or wander aimlessly. Okay, using illegal drugs such as, let's just call it PCP, and methamphetamine, commonly called meth, can cause mental illness symptoms such as hallucinations. Also, taking several prescriptions at one time can sometimes cause negative drug interactions that lead to symptoms imitating schizophrenia. Alright, drug treatment. Detoxification, test question, is often the first step in a drug treatment program. It is the process of allowing the body to rid itself of a drug while managing the symptoms of withdrawal. Withdrawal, test question, refers to the physical and mental symptoms that occur after chronic use of a drug is reduced and stopped. Symptoms may vary depending on the drug that can include agitation, confusion, cramps, sweating, and convulsions. In extreme cases, withdrawal symptoms, if not managed appropriately, can lead to death. Alright, know that there is Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, or Smart Recovery as some resources for those types of people. Marchman Act. The Hall S. Marchman Alcohol and Other Drug Services Act of 1993, commonly known as the Marchman Act, provides people in need of substance misuse services, also referred to as substance abuse services, access to emergency services and temporal protective custody on either a voluntary or involuntary basis. Criteria for the Marchman Act. The Florida statutes state that the criteria for referring a person for involuntary admission into a facility under the Marchman Act, person may be referred or taken into a receiving facility for involuntary admission for substance abuse if there is good faith reason to believe that the person is substance abuse impaired or has a co-occurring mental health disorder, and because of such impairment or disorder, the person, 1, has lost the power of self-control because of substance abuse, 2, is either A, in need of substance abuse services, or B, likely to suffer from neglect or refuse to take care of themselves. The Marchman Act also specifies other situations where you would take a person in protective custody or deliver them to a treatment facility. These situations may include the person volunteers to receive treatment or the court is petitioned for an ex parte order. Alright, let's see here. Transportation and documentation for a person in crisis. Alright, transporting a person in crisis. In addition to making a referral for services, you may have to transport a person suspected of having a mental illness or misusing substance to another location. Let's see here. You're either going to go to a mental health hospital, a normal hospital, a substance misuse treatment facility, a jail facility, or a shelter or safe house. Okay, documentation. You're going to have your Baker Act report, your Baker Act ex parte order, or an agency-specific Marchman Act form, as well as writing your report. Okay, now we're going to move into criminal gangs. One of the most dangerous population groups that you may encounter is a criminal gang, as a test question. The expansion of these groups and their violence and criminal activity may have made them a national problem. The Florida statutes define a criminal gang as, know this for the test, a formal or informal ongoing organization, association, or group that has as one of its primary activities the commission of criminal or delinquent acts, and that consists of 3 or more persons who have a common name or common identifying signs, colors, or symbols, including but not limited to terrorist organizations and hate groups. Criminal gang activity is any act committed with the intent to benefit or further the interest of a criminal gang. So know what criminal gang activity is. These activities may include theft, burglary, fraud, narcotics manufacturing and distribution, assault and battery, racketeering, witness intimidation, extortion, vandalism, arson, weapons and explosives, counterfeiting, and homicide. Typically violent crimes. And usually most crimes committed are going to be hostility between rival gangs. Florida gangs are overwhelmingly comprised of young males between the ages of 13 and 23. Gang members may have experienced child abuse or neglect and have come from a disadvantaged social economic background. Usually they are school dropouts, unemployed, and frequently in trouble with law enforcement. Individual joins gang for a variety of reasons, including psychological needs, a sense of structure and discipline, safety, a sense of security and protection, social acceptance, a feeling of belonging, self-esteem, a sense of confidence in oneself, and fame, a sense of power and prestige. Gang members identify themselves and promote gang solidarity through the use of identifying symbols such as graffiti and tagging, tattoos, hand signs, clothing and jewelry, colors, and music. Many gangs require new members to prove their loyalty to the gang and to solidify their membership through an initiation process. Often these acts include committing criminal or sexual activity or being subjected to violence. Use extreme caution when dealing with gang members. Let's see. Documentation. Documentation of gang activity is extremely important. Usually you're going to have some sort of gang unit inside your agency here. Extremist groups. There are certain organized groups, often known as extremist groups, which advocate violence and the illegal disruption of the lawful activities of others. Let's see here. Terrorism is not isolated to foreign affairs. People who commit terrorist activities within the United States seek to intimidate the civilian population or influence the policy of government by intimidation or coercion. They may also seek to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. White supremacist groups are a common terrorism group within the United States. These groups share the ideology that the thoughts, beliefs, and actions of white people are superior to those of other races. Sovereign citizens. Know this for the test. The sovereign citizen movement is a subculture of society that holds anti-government beliefs and does not recognize federal, state, or social laws, regulations, or policies. Sovereign citizens participate as individuals or in groups without established leadership. They usually come together only in loosely affiliated groups to train, help each other with paperwork, or socialize and talk about their ideology. They sometimes refer to themselves as constitutionalists or freemen, which indicate their decision to not recognize federal, state, or local laws, regulations, or policies. Alright, let's see. Many sovereign citizens attempt to establish their beliefs by filing legal documents to renounce their citizenship, return social security cards, and cancel birth certificates. They believe in the redemption theory, which holds that the U.S. government went bankrupt when it replaced the gold standards with paper currency in 1933. And they believe in emancipating themselves from the U.S. government by refusing to either pay taxes or use a state driver's license or obey U.S. laws. And they may engage in criminal activities related to defrauding banks, credit institutions, and the U.S. government because they consider these organizations to be without merit. Sovereign citizens are also known for clogging the courts by filing hundreds of documents containing unintelligible language, a practice known as paper terrorism. The Florida statutes prohibit sovereign citizens from filing false documents. If a sovereign citizen perceives they are provoked by a government official, the sovereign citizen may retaliate by filing nuisance property liens and frivolous lawsuits against the official. Know that sovereign citizens can be extremely violent, and they can also try to ambush you as well. Some indicators of sovereign citizens: they have anti-government bumper stickers, homemade vehicle registrations, use of personal seals, stamps, or thumbprints in red ink, homemade ID from a non-recognizable territory. They spell their name in all capital letters. Signatures followed by under duress, sovereign living soul, SLS, or the copyright symbol. Excessive reference to the Bible, Constitution, or the United States, U.S. Supreme Court decisions, or treaties with foreign governments. And no militias. Militias refuse to recognize the authority of municipal, state, and federal governments. Many of today's militias are connected by self-described patriot beliefs. The most common beliefs are the Second Amendment. The only well-armed people can enforce their own rights. Any form of gun regulation is a denial of their rights. And the 16th Amendment, allowing federal income tax, was authorized through fraud. And that concludes Chapter 6. If you guys hung out to the end here, good work. Good luck on this test. Thankfully, with this one, there are a lot of terms for the test, so it should be pretty straightforward. The most confusing part of this chapter, in my opinion, is the developmental disabilities, the mental illnesses, the different types of mood disorders, personality disorders, and knowing which type or which. I would say that's probably the most confusing part. So if you focus on memorizing those and you get them down with pat, the rest of it is mostly just terms and definitions. So good luck on that test. I'll catch you guys on the next video.